So what you just saw there was an animation I finished a few days ago. And in this video, I'm just going to show you how I did all of the movement and all of the, how I made all these pieces fit and link together to create this complex looking mechanism, and the doors and the camera movement and just anything that's moving. I'm going to go over that and show you how I put it all together. And it's going to look kind of complex at first, but I promise I'll break it down in a way that is very simple, because at a very fundamental level, all the things that are happening here are quite simple movements. It's just that I've added a lot of stuff on top of it to make it look more complex, but you'll see it's pretty easy. You don't need to know much going into this at all. So yeah, enjoy. So I think where I want to start is, well, first of all, the colors you see here, I have this setting turned on instead of switching this from material, so it's all gray. I have it set to random, so it just assigns a random color to everything in the viewport, just to make it easier to see which objects are joined and which ones aren't. But you don't need to have that on if you don't want. But anyways, let's look at this right here. I want to start here because it looks like the most complex thing, but it's actually quite simple, and it'll kind of explain everything in a very easy way. So this, I know it looks a bit crazy. If you're not used to this kind of thing, it might look very hard to make this, but I'll break this down in a way that's very simple and easy to follow. So here's the thing that is moving on the ground, this kind of locking mechanism I've made, but let's look at what's actually going on here. So I think the easiest way to break this down is to start with a few new objects and show you my parenting and empty kind of system that is going on here. So I'm going to start with a random, just a new cube over here. So we'll just add this here. I'll put the cursor right here, and I'll make something kind of similar to this, but a more simplified version, so you can see how this all works. Now, I'm going to be doing a lot of parenting, and I'm going to be using empties. If you don't know what that is, I'll quickly explain it right now, because it sounds a bit scary if you're not used to this, but it is very simple. So I'm going to add an empty. So you just shift A, empty. I'll just pick cube because it's easy. So now we have this right here. If you're not sure what this is, basically what an empty does is it's what it sounds like. It's an object that is empty. So you can't see it in the viewport. You can't see it in the render, but you can see it in like solid and wireframe view. Now, the reason that's important is because you can use this to kind of direct other objects and move them around from one single control point. Here's an example of that. So say I have a few different objects around here, and I want to be able to move them all at once, but still have independent control of each one of them. I can take all of these objects and I can select the empty last, and I can hit Control P. This brings up the parent menu. And this just means that if I hit this one here, object keep transform, that will parent all of these objects to the one I selected last, which is the empty. And it just means that now I can still move these all around independently. I can do whatever I want to these, but it just means when I have this empty selected and I move this around, these will all follow it now. So it doesn't matter if I rotate, scale, or move it around. All of the objects that are parented to this one object, and it doesn't have to be an empty, you can parent it to any object, but all of these things are now controlled by this one empty object that you won't see. So that's really useful for having things rotate around like this, or if you want to move a whole chunk of things at once and you don't want to have them all joined together. That's where this is useful. So let me show you how I might set something like this up to kind of create like this locking weird, I don't really know what you call it, but whatever this thing is. So I'll start with, again, I'll just do a new cube just to kind of demonstrate this, and I'll just quickly make some kind of very basic thing like this. We'll just do like a simplified kind of version of what I was just showing. So right away, I'm just going to kind of block out the basic shape I want. So the idea is maybe I'll have two pieces here, and they'll kind of spread this way, and one will go that way, one will go this way, and then maybe this whole thing will like go up and rotate around like this. And that's how it'll unlock. And so the way to do that is we have to do some keyframing. So if you're completely new to animation, I'd recommend, I'll link some other video about like basic keyframes and stuff like that. But I'm assuming you already know like how to set regular keyframes. So I'm gonna set let's start with a location keyframe here. So I'm gonna hit I on this thing right here, and I want it to start here. So we'll hit I for insert keyframe, and I'll just pick location. So now there's a keyframe for the location saying, okay, at this frame, be at this spot right here. I'm going to move forward some amount of frames. I'm just going to move it over here and somewhere there, it doesn't really matter. And I'm gonna hit I again, and I'll just do another location keyframe, and you can see we now have this thing moving. This is the graph editor, by the way. I should have explained that, but normally you'll see this. This is the timeline. It's in there by default. I'm gonna be using the graph editor, which looks scary if you've never used it, but it is actually very simple to use. It's the same thing as the timeline, except you get a graph view of all the keyframes you have, and it means that you can actually move these around and adjust it on the fly, which is very, very handy. And you also get a visual of where things are going. Okay, so we have this thing moving now because we just set 2 keyframes. So it starts here, moves here, done. Okay, I'll make it look fancy later, but let's just get the basics out of the way for now. So I want to copy this to this one as well. So I don't know what the best way to do this is. I'm just going to right click and copy and then just paste it in here. I might have to actually insert one keyframe and then paste it. And then I actually want to scale it. I want to flip it around. So I might just, I might delete the, let's go in here, delete the X keyframe, delete the Z keyframes because we're not using those. And then I'll select the Y keyframes, which are, it's now just in the same spot as this other object. I might just flip that around. So I'll hit SY in -1, and then I'll just kind of move that back to where it was. So, and oh, I should have moved it over this way. So it's probably better ways to set that up, but anyways, I could have just done it manually, but I wanted it to move the same amount. So yeah, so anyways, these things are now just moving this way, and I think I might have messed this up. So this one starts on frame 103, so I'll just make sure this is lining up the same. Okay, cool. So now it's just 2 bricks that are moving in the opposite direction. And I think what I'm going to do is go back to this frame where these are in this spot, and I'm going to select these, and I'm going to do what I just showed you. I'm going to parent those to this empty. So I'll hit Control P, keep transform, object keep transform, this one right here. And now they can still move independently like I was showing. So nothing has changed, except now I get this extra control point, and I can move both of these any direction or rotate it any way I want with just one object instead of doing everything twice. And it could be many, right? Like I could keep duplicating this as many times as I want and keep having a ton of things. Oh, there's the X and Y keyframes are kind of messing this up, but you know, I could do this, delete the X keyframe. Oh, okay, well, there we go. Yeah. So anyways, you can keep duplicating stuff around like this, but I'll just keep it very simple to start off with. So like I said, I wanted to, like, these 2 things to move apart, go up, and then rotate. So I think the easiest way to do that is, yeah, from this empty right here. So after this is done, let's maybe say insert keyframe. So I, and I'll pick location here because I want it to move upwards. So let's start that there. And then maybe after some amount of time, we can go up to like right here, I location. So now it's going up like that. It's a bit fast, and also I want it to start a bit later after this finishes moving. So like there, and maybe this can just go a little bit more this way. Cool. And then maybe I don't need it to go up as high, so I can just drag this down a bit. And this is why I like the graph editors, because you can just move it around exactly as you need to. So it's going to go up, ignore that thing in the background. And then when it gets to the top, let's say I want it to rotate. So I might just go forward a few frames. I for insert keyframe, and then rotation. And then maybe go forward a few more frames, and then I'll just rotate it maybe 90 degrees, maybe negative 90 degrees. And I'll hit I rotation again. So now after this point, it's just going to spin that way. And that's way too fast, so I might just grab this. It's going to insert X rotation and Y rotation. All I care about is Z rotation, so I'm going to delete those other 2. And let's move this over a bit more so that it's a much slower rotation, because I want it to be kind of, yeah, like that. Okay, cool. So this should be making a little bit more sense now what's going on here. If we go back to this, I'll keep going in a second and make it look fancy in a minute, but if we take another look at this, you can see it's the same kind of thing that I was just showing you, where these objects are just moving kind of around the center, and now this empty is rotating them. It's the same thing, but just a more intricate version of it, right? I've just spent more time detailing it and making the shapes a bit more fancy and adding weird patterns and adding more complex shapes, but it's the same exact technique that's happening, right? these things are moving. It's just a couple of keyframes there, and then this empty is rotating, right? And all these other objects are parented to that empty. So you can see how you can take this basic method and you can make it very, very complex by just adding more stuff and making it look like it's more complex, but it's the same thing that's happening. So anyways, let's make this look a little bit nicer, because in this one you can see there's some more stuff happening. Like if you watch the animation, it kind of like, if you pay attention to where it like kind of clicks into place and then starts moving, it's not as robotic and like just bad looking, because it's, you know, kind of snaps into place a little bit. So the way you do that is, I'll just kind of show you this in a second. But the reason you'd want to do that is because when you have like this is meant to be like a big, intricate, interlocking object that's moving around, and I wanted that to kind of feel a bit more like it's really locking into place, as opposed to just this weightless object that's moving. So you can see those little things at the end where it kind of jolts into place and clicks into place. That really adds just a bit of weight, or at least that's what I was trying to do, especially here, right? Like that click is very satisfying to look at, and it just makes it feel like weightier and more real, I guess. So the way you might do something like that is like this. So let's start with this here. So this is where the graph editor becomes very, very important as well. So right now it's just added these linear keyframes where it's just a perfectly straight line, so it's not moving, and then it goes to just moving linearly and then just stops moving. That would be nice to get rid of. So I think what I might do is actually right click, interpolation mode, and then switch this over to Bezier. And then this will kind of smooth out the curve a little bit. This might be the default for you. So if you want to switch it to linear, you just right click, interpolation mode, linear, and then that switches it between these two. Now this is going to be overly smooth, and I'm not sure what's going on there. Why is there two of these? Yeah, so this is going to be, sorry, I have to do that again because I had it duplicated. Interpolation mode, Bezier. So this is going to be overly smooth for this one. And let me do the same thing here to really show you what this looks like. Right, so that just looks a bit like unrealistic and overly smooth and just not very nice. So I think what I'm going to do is just shorten down these handles a lot. So in this graph editor, it's the same controls as the viewport, where middle mouse button is move around, S is scale, and like G is move, R is rotate, all that. It's all the same controls, which is very nice. So I might take this, and I'm going to delete the Z and the X. Yeah, Z location, X location, I don't need those. But Y location I do. And for some reason I accidentally deleted that other thing. Whoops. Okay, so let me just take this and I'll just shrink it down. So I'm just hitting S on this right here. And I'm just going to shrink it down so that it's less gradual. So I think it's actually okay if it starts gradual and then kind of snaps into place at the end. I think that might be fine. So if it kind of clunks into place, that would be cool. And this, I'm going to move this over a little bit too, just so it has a bit of buffer time before it goes up. So now at the end here, this is where I want it to be a bit snappier. So it's going to start gradual and then just kind of like clunk into place at the end. I think that'd be cool. So you can kind of just duplicate keyframes as you want and move these handles around and just kind of make things fit into what would make sense. So I think what I want it to do is just kind of at the very end, when it gets to this point, I want it to snap maybe a bit further, or maybe the other way, like snap back and then click back into place like this. So something like that, right? So it's boom, and that's obviously exaggerated, but just a little smaller version of that would be cool. So I'll just kind of bring this down, maybe move it over just a frame after it hits the end point. 2 frames maybe, it'll kind of click back into place. And then it'll just kind of end up right back where it needs to. So like that. So just a little click. And it's still pretty exaggerated, but I'm going to make it even smaller. Just like that. Maybe could even move it over 1 frame. And this handle's kind of making this annoying, so I'll just move that in this way. And look at that. Now, I don't want it to look cartoonish because if you make this effect extreme, it's going to be like, it's just going to look like a cartoon and fake. But I want to have it visible too. So for this example, if it's a little bit overdone, that's okay. It's just to get the point across. And then I want to do the same thing on this one. I'm not really sure what the best way to transfer like the inverse of this animation data over would be, but I'll just do it manually really quick. I guess I could just do the same thing, copy the keyframes and then flip the y-axis. I might just do that actually because here, let's do that. Let's copy this and then I'll just go into here. I'll just go to another point in here and then paste it, and then I'll sy minus 1, and then I just want it to start from 0 so that it does the right movement. There we go. And then what happens is anytime you drag, like if you have a bunch of keyframes and you drag, like you duplicate one keyframe and you drag it into the same location as another one, it'll actually just override that one. So if this keyframe is on frame 262 and I duplicate a keyframe onto 262, onto frame 262, but it's in a different spot, it'll just override it from that spot. So what that means is I can actually just take this entire thing, this new thing I just made, and just duplicate it right onto the old one, and then it should just override it. And then there we go. So now it's just doing that right there. Cool. So now, instead of just moving linearly, it's kind of going slowly and then snapping into place at the end, kind of clicking into there like that. And I can do the same thing for this one, this empty right here. So let's go interpolation mode, Bezier, and right, it like when something's moving, it's not just going to immediately start moving at full velocity upwards, right? It's going to be, it'd probably make more sense to be a bit more gradual and maybe again click into place at the top. So I'll just make this much smaller. So it's gradual and then boom, hits an endpoint somewhere right there. And then I want the rotation to be a little bit more delayed. So I'm going to select those rotation keyframes, and then let's just hit L for select linked, and I'll just move that over a little bit so it has a bit more time between where it moves up and then rotates. Okay, so let's go back to the Z location and just kind of bring this up here. So you're gonna have to get used to like hitting control and middle mouse button is zoom on the viewport, but it's also zoom in here, and it goes sideways and up and down. So you'll get used to how to like navigate this and just zoom into exactly what you want to see. But it is kind of annoying to use at first, but it does get easier after using it a bit. Okay, so after this gets to the top right here, goes to there, I think I want it to do the same thing where it kind of goes back the other way a few frames or even one frame and then kind of snaps back into place. So let's just take this and kind of just move it like that. And then this will just go there, maybe move back like that. So let's just see what that looks like. Goes up and then kind of goes down and then back up. Like that. Cool. So watch how that is going up and then kind of goes down and then clicks back up. That's what I want. Maybe just move it over one frame to be a little bit snappier. Just like that. Perfect. And obviously you can make this however strong or subtle you want. You know, you can go a bit extreme with it, but I think it looks better just keeping it pretty subtle like this. And I kind of messed it up now. So let me just try and get back to where I was. So right, maybe right there-ish. Yeah, that's pretty good. Okay, I'll stick with that for now. Maybe make it a little bit bigger. And then we can do the same thing for the rotation of this one, but I think you get the point by now, where you can just draw in these little extra bumps in the keyframes to make it look like it's heavier or lighter than just a weightless object. Right, so this one, I would do the same. I'm not going to do it because I just showed you a bunch of times, but I would do the exact same here, where it kind of gradually moves and then kind of snaps into place at the end. And you just go through and you kind of just manually do it frame by frame. And it sounds like a lot of work, but there's not like that much stuff that's actually moving here. There's only a few things, right? Like this thing is basically what I just did. These things on the side is like one more of those, right? Moving downwards. And then after that, there's like a couple of extra things moving in the middle, but then mostly it's just this empty that's rotating, right? And so you can have tons of things parented to one single object, one single empty, and have things move off of that. And another thing you can do is you can kind of have this, I think the nicest parenting workflow to use is where you have the main things parented to this empty, and then kind of sub things that come off of these objects or are connected to these objects parented to these things. So say I add like another cube in here, and maybe I want this to be like some like bolt that goes down like this. Well, what I might do is start it here, and then let's parent it. Instead of parenting it to that empty, I might parent it to this one. So Control P, K, and then when this moves, it'll move with it, and then maybe I can move this independently on its own as well. So maybe once it gets here, it like locks into place. So maybe this can be like there. It can go I location, go forward a few frames, move it down I location, and right. So now it goes boom, locks into place. Cool. And maybe let's delete the X and Y location so I can move it around, and then keep the Z location because that's what's moving, and then maybe just duplicate this over this way onto this thing. And so this doesn't make sense now because it's like clipping through the center, so maybe I'd have to like move this over this way or whatever. And it's parented to the wrong thing, so I have to actually Alt P to clear parent, and then I'll just move it into place. Control P, keep transform to this one because I want it to be based off the movement of this green one right here. So now, boom, 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 locks into place just like that. Right, and so like now this thing's moving and this bolt is going down. Maybe there's some extra little thing that should come off of this and do another version of that. So I might hit Alt P, clear parent and keep transformation, and then maybe I'll parent it to this one. So Control P, keep transform, and you can see maybe like I'll just delete the keyframes. Whoops, delete the keyframes for this one, and then maybe right it'll come down, and then maybe this other thing can come down after that or something. Whatever. So now it's following the movement of this thing, right? So like this thing is following the movement of this thing is following the movement of this, and this thing is following the movement of this. But that doesn't mean that this directly follows the movement of this. It does, but it means that I can, like, each thing I move goes further and further down this hierarchy of things connected to each other. I know that's kind of a confusing way to put it, but I hope what I'm showing you kind of makes sense in a like chain kind of workflow. So yeah, that's how you'd make this kind of rotating thing. So anyways, that's what's happening here, right? So we have this thing, like if I go to this empty that's rotating, it's this one right here, and I just select all the things that are connected to that. And by the way, the way you can select things that are parented to this is you hit Shift, close square bracket. So on the keyboard, there's the square brackets. Just hit Shift and then the closed one, and then you just press as many times as you want to go down the hierarchy of things that are parented. So that just selects any objects that are parented to this object, and then if you keep pressing it, it'll just go further and further down the chain of things that are parented. So if I do that here, if I click this empty and I just select everything that's connected to this, and I isolate it, all of this stuff is all just things that are, it's the exact same thing where I parented one thing to this empty. Like say I parented a cube to this empty, then maybe I parented a cylinder to the cube, and maybe I parented a plane to that cylinder. And then from that, you can do kind of independent movement of all these different objects, but they're all connected up this chain to this thing. So if I move this, it moves everything. If I move this right here, it moves another thing, and then this kind of goes right like further down this chain right here where these things are connected to this. This is connected to the empty. When I move the empty, it moves everything. But when I move this, it only moves a couple things. And yeah, so you could just keep adding things. And like the way I would have done this, it looks really complex. Like there's all these weird shapes, but this is a thing I just modeled in another project, like some weird pattern. Like it would have just been, I can just do this right now really quick. Some random, like I'll just make some really rough version of what this would have been, right? Like just make some really random shape like this, and then just kind of take that, set origin to geometry, And then maybe this can be parented to, say I want some really complex movement. I'll do it on this one here on our demo. Although I kind of lost it. Let's just take this right here. There we go. So on our demo here, I would have just taken some shape like this. In fact, we can make this even more complex if I go to edit mode and just kind of make it a bit more crazy. Okay, so this shape, and say I want it to be kind of doing the same thing where this is kind of following this rotation. Well, I could just put this here. Let's parent it to this main empty because I don't really want it to do any movement other than what this empty is doing. So Control P, object heap transform, and then we can just duplicate this around kind of randomly and just kind of make some weird, crazy pattern. Let's just scale this way, right? Whatever. Get that in there, and then now, since these are all duplicated from that one that was parented, it means they're all. You can see these lines going through here. So these are all now parented to this main empty. So if I move this, it's going to move all that. And you can see now it's going to do this, go up. It's all going to follow that thing. And then it's all going to rotate with that main empty. And then you can keep adding stuff like that and make it as complex as you want. And you can build things around it and you can make it look fancy and add textures and all that, right? Like this is all cubes. So imagine what you can do if you actually make it look nice and like do modeling and make like build a cylinder maybe. Okay, this should work. So anyways, I'll take a cylinder and let's just model some little thing that goes around here. I have no idea what was happening with that circle. But anyways, I'll copy the location of this and then yeah, same thing, just kind of put this here. Maybe let's hit E and then just kind of bring this out to extrude it. Right, and so you can build an entire excuse me. You can build an entire scene around the thing that's getting animated, right? And so you just kind of make it look like it's supposed to fit in here, and you can just do all sorts of crazy designs and whatever and make things, you know, kind of build things around the animation that's already happening and just make it look like it all fits together in a really nice way, right? And do booleans, do bevels and extrusions, and just build a thing, a contraption around this basic movement. And then before you know it, you'll have this really complex looking system that looks really interesting to watch, right? Okay, so that's that right there. Let's talk a bit about the other animations in here. And it should make a lot more sense now that you've seen how I set up what is really the most complicated part of this. So if I go through here, there's the next animation that's happening is, I guess I'll talk about the camera in a bit, but the next object that's moving around is these doors right here. So this was kind of fun to do, like opening this crazy 3-level door. That should make sense now. It was pretty easy. So let's break this down piece by piece. There's 3 of them, but I'll just open up I'll just kind of isolate one of them and just show you how this is working, and then the other 2 should make sense after that. So if I do that thing where I select the objects that are parented to this, shift close square bracket, and I'll just isolate this. So it is basically a cube that is keyframed to move this way, and it's got a mirror modifier, but let me show you how this was done. So I would have added a cube here, and I'll just keep this right here. I'm going to add an empty, a plane axis right here, and I'm just going to move this over 1. So now we have this empty, same thing as before, it's just a different shape of empty, does the exact same thing though. And then I'm going to add a mirror modifier on this thing. Now, you have to be careful with mirror modifiers when it's being animated, I've found. So there's probably a better way to do this. Honestly, I would recommend maybe doing it manually, like just manually doing everything twice, or just use a mirror modifier by creating it in geometry node somehow, or just find another way to get it to mirror. Because for some reason, when a mirror modifier gets applied to an object that's moving, I found that you might run into some issues in the animation. It just might glitch out. So I'm not really sure what's happening there, if there's something I'm doing that's causing that, but just for this example, I'll do it, but just be careful with this. If you experience glitches in the animation, just try a different method of getting it to mirror. But anyways, what's important here is the movement. So I would have just done this, I location, move it, I location, right? It opens. And then same thing, you just keyframe it to look a little bit nicer. So if we take a look at the keyframes here, let's just see what's going on here. Basic Bezier keyframes. So gradual, this one I think it makes sense to be like gradually opening and then kind of gradually closing. Nothing crazy. And then same thing where I've added these extra pieces here. I could have joined these, but I just decided to add these objects and then just parent it to that main object that's moving. And then that way I can move these all around independently again as much as I need to, and I don't need to worry about it being joined together or whatever. Right, and so this thing is just a cube moving, and then what I would have done is to make 3 of them. So it would have been like, we've got this shape right here, right, and then it's kind of like this. What I would have done is just duplicated that behind it, and I should have actually, before that, I should have actually deleted these other keyframes. If I do this and then play it, it's going to go back to where it was because there is a Y location keyframe. So when you hit I and then location, it inserts a keyframe for X, Y, and Z location. So I don't need that. I just want the X location because it's moving along the X axis and nothing else, right? So I can delete the Y location and the Z location from here. And that means it's going to do the same thing, but I can actually move it around on the Y and Z without it snapping back to place. So anyways, let me duplicate this now. I'll just line it up so it's kind of just barely behind here like that. And then what I might do is just take those keyframes. So that, just take that and then just offset it. So I'll hit just GX to move it along the X axis. GX, I don't know, we'll do 50. And so it's doing the exact same animation, but it's just delayed 50 frames now, right? So this is going to open 50 frames later. This one opens, and then we could do that as many times as you want, right? So and then maybe on this one here, I'll hit to GX 50 again. So now it's 50 frames later than that one. So this one goes 50 frame delay. This one goes 50 frame delay. This one goes, and then you can take all these and maybe make them Bezier interpolation. Cool. Now it kind of opens a little bit nicer. I would make this longer, so I would just take these and go like this, right? And so now this one's opening. Now this one opens, right? And that's exactly how I did that here. And then all I did was I just put a different design on each one of those levels. So I just put a different pattern on each level just to make it more interesting and kind of look a bit cooler. But it's the same animation, just offset 3 times. So that's all the complex animation done. I'll talk about the camera in a second, but I do want to add that you can make things look a lot more intricate and complicated by just adding things that kind of look like they'd fit together and lock together. So for example, this thing right here kind of looks like some big lock on the door that is really just meant to be there. It's just a basic shape though. Like the way you can do this stuff is, and I should not have done this here, but it's okay. Now there's a bunch of overlapping demos over there, but whatever. The way you can do this is let's use the same exact parenting workflow I was showing before. So I might just add another cube on top of this, and I want this cube to follow the movement of this main door, right? So let's hit Control, or just select this one, select the door, Control P, and Object Heap Transform. So now it's going to do the same thing, and let's just say, okay, so I want this to be kind of like some interesting lock kind of shape. So let's take this and just kind of model a very basic thing. So it can just be like, this is going to go there. That is terribly not proportional at all, but it's fine. And then let's do another one. Now, here's a problem. So I want it to be mirrored, but I want it to follow the animation of this, but I can't really just like make it mirror. I guess I want it to be a separate thing here, which is actually, this is not a mirror of it, right? Because it's offset, so it's not a exact copy. But now, how do I make it follow the animation of this? So this is where the mirror modifier is actually kind of annoying. I ended up finding a solution where, what did I even do? I used an object constraint, I think, and I made it so that it like automatically offsets from the other one based on something like some complex thing. But really what I would do is just honestly take this door, maybe just not even use the mirror modifier, and just kind of manually add a second door and just manually keyframe it. So what I would do is maybe just measure the exact distance that I moved this, and then just do the same thing but the opposite on the other door, and that way you could parent this much easier and make it work a lot better. But I mean, I found this weird workaround here where I used an object constraint, what even was it? transformation constraint. So here's the settings I use. I just changed this right here, these settings. So I went from 0 to 1 to, I can't even remember what was going on here. Whatever these settings are, if you want to use that exact workflow. But like I said, I would just duplicate it twice, manually do the animation of the door twice, and then just parent each object to the corresponding door, and that would work much better. Okay, so hopefully you can see now how this would work. So you can just add, objects on top of each other and do that parenting thing where it just follows the movement of the main thing and then just lines up with other objects in a way that looks very intricate, and that can add a lot of complexity and make it look like, whoa, that's kind of crazy. Okay, let's talk about the camera now. So camera movement is actually very easy. The hard thing is just finding a good camera angle in the first place, but once you've found a good angle, making it move is very, very easy. So let's look at the camera angle here. It is just very basic. We are at 18 millimeters. This gets keyframed later on, but it sticks at 18 millimeters for almost the entire animation. And then to get this to just like nicely move forward like this, all you do is this. We have a Y location keyframe. Ignore all this, that's some extra stuff, but it's just 2 keyframes. So it's start where you want the camera to start, move forward a few keyframes, add another one. So I'll just add another camera here, and we'll just make this the active one for now. And I'll just add a marker that assigns this one to the active camera, and I'll just delete all keyframes. So now we have a new camera just for demo, and let's say it starts right here. I'm starting at frame 10 just for this example, but imagine it's frame 0 for you. So I'll say, okay, I location, and it's going to start there, and then same thing I've been doing, move forward a few frames, move it a little bit forward, and then hit I location. And this is the trick I learned from Ian Hubert, which I'll show you. So it's actually moving like this, and it stops there now. But what you can do is select these 2 keyframes, and you can hit Shift E. And this brings up the F-curve extrapolation menu, which just means that you can hit this right here. If you hit Shift E, linear extrapolation. So that will just extrapolate. In other words, extend these keyframes off of the main ones we've just added. So if I hit that, it takes those 2 keyframes and it just adds a line on either side that it kind of extends the range of that. So now it actually goes across the entire animation. And what's nice about that is you can now adjust the speed very, very easily. And so I can just move this. It doesn't really matter where this is. I can just move the speed exactly where I want. You could also just set 2 keyframes, one at the beginning, one at the end, and then just skip that step and just move it manually. That's fine too. I just like doing it this way. So anyways, that is there. And you'll notice that I did not set this to be a Bezier curve. I set it to be linear. And the reason is because this is something you see all the time with beginners doing animation, is they'll set it to be very, very smooth camera movements where it's like, I'll show you like this, interpolation with Bezier. And then it would be like, here, I'll get rid of the linear extrapolation. It starts like this, eases forward, and then stops. If I want to make this more extreme, it would be like this. So boom, eases forward, and then comes to a slow halt. For whatever reason, when you see this, it just screams beginner and bad and not good. So please try to avoid this if you can. Obviously, it's not like a super, like you can break that rule if you want, but I would say like 99% of the time it will just look better and more cinematic and more professional if you just have it a straight basic line like this, where it just, like, as soon as you, like, from frame 1, it's already moving. It's kind of like as if you cut to this camera like in post or something. Like, that's kind of the effect of like what this does, where it's just as soon as it cuts to this camera, it's already going forward and it doesn't ease into the movement. For whatever reason, it just looks very beginner when you have this easing. And that's specifically on the camera movement, not on objects, but specifically on the camera. Okay. So that's how I did that. So it's just, the camera's just moving forward. That was a long explanation to tell you that the camera is literally just going forward. There's nothing else. So there's that. Let's talk about switching cameras though, because there are multiple shots in here, and I actually did this in Blender. So you can see it actually cuts from this camera to this camera, and then to this one, and then back to the main one. Here is how you do that. So I actually just did it in that example, but the way you do that is this. Say I want it to, so we have this one, I want it to cut at frame 100 to maybe a new camera that's back here. And I'll just take this and kind of move it downwards. So here's how you do this. So I'll just go to the frame that I want it to cut at, so frame 100. I'm going to go to marker and then add marker. And then I'm going to go marker again, and I'm going to hit bind camera to markers. So now at this marker, it'll set the active camera to the one that I have selected. And I actually have to go back to the beginning and do another marker. I already have one for the first camera. If you don't do that, it'll just stay on the new camera though. So you just add a marker at whatever point you want the camera to switch or start at. So I would add one marker at the beginning for the main camera, and then one marker later for the secondary camera. And that is how that works. So yeah, at frame 100, it'll switch to this one. And if I want it to switch back to the main one, then I'll just duplicate this camera right here, or this marker rather, and then it'll switch back. You can see it switching right here to the main camera whenever it reaches this marker. So again, add a marker, bind camera to marker, and then make sure frame 1 has the original camera binded to it. And that's it. And then you could just move the cameras around wherever you want, switch up the angle, and then just get like a bunch of shots in one animation, which is really handy. So I know in this one, I didn't go too much into like camera angle, lighting, textures, and all that, and building this scene. It was mostly just about movement and animations and getting things to fit together. But if you want to learn how to make environments like this from start to finish, that's exactly what I teach in my environments course. You can watch me create environments completely from start to finish, explain the whole way through. So definitely check that out if that sounds right for you. But thanks for watching, and I'll see you in some other video. Bye.